So I've been watching this January 6th committee, wondering how in the world has America come to this point? How is
Mhm.
it even possible that a president who's broken every norm, violated numerous laws, and even attempted a coup is not only walking a free man, but has become the undisputed leader of his party? I believe he's beyond doubt the greatest con man who's ever lived. During my reflection, however, I will not mention his name for reasons I'll explain later by citing a parable of Jesus. As a person of faith, I ask myself, why are Americans so willing to fall for this master of deception? One of the books that helped me understand the nature of evil was Scott Peck's People of the Lie. A psychotherapist, Scott Peck defines evil not as causing harm, either consciously or unconsciously. We all hurt others. And when we do realize what we've done, we usually feel badly and apologize or try to make amends. That's a normal human response, but not for people of the lie. They adamantly deny the harm they've caused. And this denial requires deception, self deception, and deceiving others. People of the lie often gravitate towards religion or politics, where they can cloak their deception in symbols that people believe in: the flag, the Bible, or even the Constitution. Today, many Americans are in denial about the evils of slavery, Jim Crow, and much more. They want to hear the comforting lie that America is the greatest country in the world, a beacon of freedom, and an exceptional nation. This lie is what propelled demagogues to power, and in some cases, turns demagogues into demigods. Deception becomes a way of life, even an art for people of the lie. A clever poet took Sir Walter Scott's line, "What a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive," and added, "When we've practiced quite a while, how vastly we improve our style." What we've seen in American politics is how lying has been perfected as an art form. This is not entirely new, of course. Dictators from Augustus Caesar to Adolf Hitler engaged artists to be their propagandists and create fiction to justify power. That's the function of Hannity, Tucker Carlson, and other artists of what former Attorney General Barr has crudely but accurately termed BS. But there's another reason that Americans have fallen for the big lie, and that's because many Americans idolize celebrities. This is true not only of Americans. After the death of Stalin, Khrushchev called out the cult of personality. Stalin, Hitler, and dictators going all the way to Augustus Caesar created a cult around their personality. They created the lie that they were godlike and therefore could do no wrong. Their followers believed or pretended to believe this lie because of the deep human need to find an object of worship. Many Americans have another idol, namely mammon or money. Many Americans idolize the rich and famous, perhaps because secretly or openly they wish they could be like them. Today, we see how billionaires are able to deceive their followers into believing that they are our saviors because they are rich and they alone can fix the mess that they created. What the January 6th committee has revealed is not only this deep moral sickness in our nation, but also the antidote. We've seen public officials place principle above partisanship and refuse to bow down to the rich and powerful no matter how much they were pressured. These people of principle helped prevent what could have been an authoritarian takeover of our nation. Another antidote to the American cult of wealth and celebrity is found in one of my favorite parables of Jesus, the story of Lazarus and the rich guy. Since it's long, I'll paraphrase. Jesus talks about a rich guy who lives in a gated home, wears fine purple clothes, and every morning passes by a poor man named Lazarus who's begging at his door. Lazarus is so poor and diseased that the dogs lick his sores. Both men die. Lazarus is welcomed into the bosom of Abraham. The rich guy burns in the fires of hell. Yet even in hell, the rich guy has the nerve to ask Lazarus to fetch him some water. But Abraham says, "Too late, buddy. You had your wealth on earth, and you cut yourself off from the poor, and now you must stay where you are." This is the only time that Jesus describes hell, and it's clear that it's a place for the rich. This is not surprising since Jesus was a poor man, an itinerant rabbi, prophet, healer, who came to proclaim good news for the poor, such as debt forgiveness and a new society where there would be no more poverty. What intrigues me about this story is that Lazarus, the poor man, is named while the rich guy is nameless. That's the opposite of what happens in our society or in the domination system. The rich are famous. Their names are placed on hotels and public buildings. But the poor are nameless. They're lumped together with a label, the homeless. But in Jesus' upside down kingdom, the rich have no names and the poor have names. They have dignity and worth. Lazarus' name derives from the Hebrew word Eleazar, which means God will help. The God of Abraham is the God who favors and loves the poor, calls them by name, and calls on the rich to share their wealth with them. I have deliberately not mentioned the name of the one who's the greatest con man of all times, because I don't think his name will be written in what Jews call the book of life. Those who are just and righteous and kind, those who stand with the poor, their names will not be forgotten by God or by us. That's why I'm grateful today for Melvin Ishmael Johnson, who's been helping those in Skid Row to have a voice and be heard. And I'm eager to hear what Melvin has to tell us about what we can do to solve the homelessness problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony. That was beautiful. Stephen, will you introduce Melvin, please? Thank you.
Yes, and what a thrill it is. Melvin was an early and active supporter of ICUJP. I visualized the many times that he joined us around our circle, wherever we were meeting, and particularly at Emmanuel Presbyterian Church. Melvin will tell us more about his life experiences that have drawn him to this work. But what I recognize and honor is Melvin has been able to weave a dedicated and compassionate life from the streams of art, theater, and social justice. It's an extraordinary effort that he has made. I was the beneficiary several years ago. I wrote a play on Oliver Wendell Holmes Jr. and the invention of freedom of speech in the Supreme Court in 1919. And Melvin was so gracious to allow me to present a workshop production with live actors, with Mike Farrell playing Oliver Wendell Holmes, and a really wonderful cast. And I was able to get such an opportunity, because when you're writing a play, you have to see it live, not on the printed page. And Melvin and his theater allowed me that opportunity. Well beyond that personal impact, Melvin has really been an inspiration for generations of activists. Today he is bringing all of that compassion and insight to the shameful issue of those who are unhoused in Los Angeles in particular, but of course across the country. So Melvin, the floor is yours, and I'm so looking forward to your remarks.
Hey, thank you, Steve. I'm still waiting on you to do that great play again, wonderful play. Yeah, my name is Melvin Ishmael Johnson. A little about myself, my roots come from the Mississippi Delta. I was born in Greenville, Mississippi. I'm the son of a Baptist minister that goes all the way back to the end of the slave period. I can trace my route both sides heading back there. I head up Dramastage-Qumran Veterans Theater Workshop. We've been working in that Skid Row area since 2006. I'm also part of the Roby Theater Company as one of the advanced playwrights. We've just finished doing a play on the Tuskegee Airmen called the 101 Club with Judith Bowman as my co-play right, and it's a very interesting play about, I think everybody in Los Angeles should know about this play because the center point is an individual named Bill Roger Terry, who right here from Los Angeles, he's one of the early basketball players at UCLA. He was Jackie Robinson's roommate. And the 101 Club dealt with an incident during World War II where these officers had a peaceful protest to utilize the Officers Club, which maybe I'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later on. But may the peace and blessings of the life-giving creative spirit be upon you and upon your family. Now, did you know that in the county of Los Angeles at any given time, there are between 80 to 100,000 people just living on the streets? And that includes women, children, the elderly, and many of our military veterans who have served their country. Welcome to Skid Row, Central City East, a recovery zone, the center point of the homeless population in the county of Los Angeles. And don't think the homeless problem is just a Skid Row problem. They are homeless all over the county of Los Angeles. Now, you don't see the nails that's embedded throughout the foundations and framework of the house. It's the same with those homeless that you don't see or hear about on the news. They escape your homeless count. Now, these are the invisible homeless, the ones who live in their car or crash over to a friend's pad. And sometimes they get sick and end up in the emergency room. And after a short stay without insurance, sometimes they get dumped on Skid Row. Now, they dump us down here all the time on Skid Row. They dump us from prison. They dump us from the community beat down by life, looking for the American dream that became a nightmare. They dump us from other cities, looking for Hollywood and trying to be in anybody's show, but reality kicks in and you end up on Skid Row. As I mentioned earlier, my name is Melvin Ishmael Johnson, and this morning I'm going to talk to you about Skid Row and how to solve America's homeless problem. Now, none of this information is new. I presented the same information almost 10 years ago when I was part of the group that some of you know about. You mentioned it earlier, the Compassionate Response to Homelessness and Poverty Group. So I would like to thank ICUJC people for inviting me out. First, I would like to show a 12-minute clip about Skid Row and solving the homeless problem, and then come back and discuss some solutions and also talk a little about the Tuskegee Airmen and the play I mentioned a little earlier, and then some Q&A. So I'd like to share the screen. Okay. It says the host disabled participants sharing screen. I need to be able to share the screen.
Michael.
Can the host let me share the screen? Okay, there we go.
I guess I'm not hosting.
I turned the hosting over to Rick.
Yeah, Rick. I don't know why it's not showing up.
I see Melvin's computer screen.
Yeah, it's there.
Yes, so do I.
The
It's
Qumran
there.
Report.
Yeah,
It's
it's
there.
there.
That's why it's not showing up, because it's already there. All right. Good.
And it says that I am viewing Rick's screen.
No, we see yours, Melvin.
Mm-hmm. Well, can you exit the screen share? Okay, now let me see, can I go back in? It's still the host has the screen sharing.
Hang on a second.
Let's see again. Well, anyway, I think I can work without the 12-minute video, maybe make it more intimate.
Melvin?
Yes.
Let's make a good faith effort, because I think your prepared film could be very helpful this morning.
I also just made you co-host, Melvin, so you should be.
Okay. Let me try it again. I think that's it.
And be sure you have the setting for the sound.
Mm-hmm. There it is. Share screen. It be upon you and upon your family. My name is Melvin Ishmael Johnson. God willing, every month in the year 2020, I will give you 10 to 15 minutes of interviews about topics of community concern under the title Nuggets of Wisdoms. Now, this month we will talk about how to solve the homeless problem with interview clips from myself and longtime homeless activist Ted Hayes. Now, you can find the monthly interviews on our website, Dramastage-Qumran.org. DRAMASTAGE-QUMRAN.org. Thank you for tuning in. There was a meeting last Monday at the Los Angeles Theater Center to discuss solutions to the homeless problem, especially Skid Row. Over almost 500 people showed up. And it's clear to me that what came out of the meeting is the fact that nobody is on the same page and the homeless problem keep on growing. So Ted, I would like to ask you, and then Leslie, with all of the millions of dollars that are put into the homeless problem, why they can't come up with a solution? Why do you think they can't come up with a solution?
It's political. Mm-hmm. It's very political. The only reason why the Dome Village closed, it was political. The worst enemies to the homeless are the activists themselves. Mm-hmm. They found a niche that soothes their itch for fame, for prestige, for money. The advocates for the homeless or the social service providers, they're pimps, basically. I believe they all initially started off correctly, had a right heart, but homeless is a very difficult and complex problem. And they realize, I gotta pay my bills. And then they begin to realize, you know what? If I can feed so many people a day, bed so many people a day, that's a per diem thing that I can give to the government. I can raise me some money. And that's why I quit publicly being an activist, demonstrations, because when we came out in the 85, in those days, we were in the news all the time. The missions and the shelters and the advocates, they had the machinery to go to the constituents and say, hey, you see the homeless in the news? Send me your money because we're feeding homeless people, we're sheltering homeless people. And if you trace every one of those missions downtown, they all blew up all of a sudden, didn't they? You can trace they're getting the money back to 1985, 86, and 87. That is the root of their money. And I had gone to the social service providers, had gone to the advocates, and I went to the worst of them, the activists. And I said, look, fellas, I came out here on purpose, became homeless on purpose, slept on these sidewalks on purpose to find out what this thing is and whether or not we can resolve it. And I found something. And they resisted all the way.
About the homeless, microscope homeless solution think tank and Project Reconnect, because I see one of the major problems that just keep any solutions from happening down here in the downtown and Skid Row area is the fact that you have all of these different sectors who fail to work together as a unit to solve the problem. The business community, the activist community, the service providers, the man and woman laying in the street, the regular community. And so I just want to read something. It's a proposal for getting the research that the community can trust. And I think this is what's needed. You got to have the research that the business community can trust, the activist community, the service providers community. You got to have the same research. So that means you have to have the same input. You have to have input from all of these sectors to come up with a problem. Because no matter how, we've already proven that no matter how much money, you can put millions and millions of dollars. I think last year they put something like $118 million in trying to solve this problem. And then they look around and they say it's an 18% increase, but we see in the downtown area, it's over 80% increase in the amount of homeless population. So what happened, the more money that you put into solving this homeless problem, the more you create a bureaucracy. The more you create jobs for this bureaucracy that have no incentive to solve the homeless problem because they'll be putting themselves out of a job. So we come up with what we call the Microscope Homeless Solution Think Tank. And what it is, it's a Microscope Homeless Solution Think Tank. It's a group of 10 college students who will interview 24 stakeholders, participants from the Skid Row community about some of the major problems in the Skid Row community and possible solutions to solving the problem. And then the second part of that is Project Reconnect. The goal of this project is to utilize the research information from the Microscope Homeless Solution Think Tank and implement a dual plan to transition tent dwellers in the Skid Row area into transitional and permanent housing in the downtown Skid Row and other areas of the community. So out of this, we need to produce the community, all segments of the community need to have input into the solution so all of these different segments can trust each other and work as a unit to come up with a solution. See, it's not about money. They already tried that. See, you got to have something that would unify all of these segments to work together instead of fighting against each other like kids.
I'd like to say that I am a veteran. I'm a Vietnam veteran, 1969 to 71. Can I tell you my age now? And not only am I a veteran, but I come from a family of veterans. Out of a family of 7 males and 2 females. 6 of us served in the military. 3 in the Army, 2 in the Air Force, and I served in the United States Marine Corps. So this is why this is such an important issue to me. And not only that, since we've been working in the Skid Row area, one of the things that we notice is how many veterans that's living in the streets. See, and we're going to talk about that in a little while when we do our monologue. And so what we try to do with Dramastage-Qumran, we feel that people talk so much about the problems, that everybody knows the problems because it's amplified. You can read it in the paper and all that kind of stuff. What we try to talk about is solutions. Solutions. What is the solutions to the homeless problem? Now here's what we come up with. Because we talk to other homeless, people who have been homeless veterans, and we want to get their opinions on what do they think it takes to solve the homeless problem. And here's where we at. I think the first step in solving the homeless problem is make the homeless problem the homeless veteran problem. That's the starting point. By making it the homeless veterans problem, you put it on the shoulders of the United States government, who sent all of these young men over to fight in all of these particular wars and things like that, and come back traumatized, etc., like that. So we feel that it is also the duty of the American government to finance the solutions to it. Not just the non-veterans who's laying in the street. We feel that the starting point, make the homeless problem, the homeless veterans problem, get the American government to finance some think tanks where you can get some of the best minds in the United States, get them together, make the government pay for it, come up with some solutions, and then spread that solutions out to the rest of the homeless in terms of solving that. Now, what can the interfaith community do right now to make a dent in the homeless problem? Number one, I'm going to talk about Los Angeles, because Los Angeles is the homeless capital. See, it's homeless capital of the United States. Not only is this the homeless capital, you probably got more millionaires here in Los Angeles, kind of Los Angeles, probably than anywhere else in the United States. But you also got the blight of people laying down there in the Skid Row area down there. So here's the second part of doing something right now. We feel that the 3 major religions, the religious institutions, can also work with the city to find out all of these empty properties around here, to either buy these empty properties, rent these empty properties, and start programming what the Prophet Muhammad, what Moses, and what Jesus taught. It's right there in the scripture. You know, they started off, the Messiah Jesus, when he announced his messiahship. It's tied into that in Isaiah on what they were supposed to be doing. You know, working with people coming up out of prison, people in need and all that kind of stuff. And brother Umar, he mentioned, it's tied into the scripture of Islam, is also tied in the scripture of the Torah. See, so we feel that if these 3 major religions rent some of this empty property, start programming, start picking some of the people up that's own Skid Row, start bringing them into some of these houses, and at the same time provide support systems.
Okay, yeah, I'd like to.
Yeah, you're on screen now. So.
I don't know where that's coming from.
You're okay. You're with us.
I'm here in Democracy Now! Hold on a second.
Well, we like Amy Goodman, but we'd prefer you today.
Okay, let me see, can I get back on here? Where am I at? Okay, wow. I'm still, okay, think I'm back. Am I? All right, thank you very much. I apologize for that little interruption from democracy. Now, I would just like to say that I started working down in the Skid Row area. We found the Dramastage-Qumran in the year 2006. And when I think about that, two things and two concepts that stands out in my mind. Number one, a brother named Kevin Michael Key that was working down there. He's passed now, but he will always refer to Skid Row as a recovery zone. And the other one is a brother called General Jeff, who's also passed during the pandemic, and he had made efforts to start a Skid Row neighborhood council. Now that made me realize something that Hubert Harrison said in the early 20s. When you think about Skid Row at that particular time, Skid Row was about 80. When I started working down there, was about 80% African Americans that made up Skid Row. Now Hubert Harrison said that if you want to know the conditions of the future of the American society, just observe the conditions of the Negro. He said, politically, the Negro is the touchstone of the modern democratic idea. The presence of the Negro put our democracy to the proof and revealed the falsity of it. And as I mentioned earlier, when I started working down there, it was 70 to 80% of the homeless was Black, in programs, living on the streets in tents. And now there are tents all over the county of Los Angeles, becoming the #1 problem facing the city of Los Angeles. And I would like to discuss some suggested solutions to it. The first thing I want to discuss is what was mentioned in the video, the possibility of making the homeless problem the homeless veteran problem. And now what I mean by that is I think we saw a lot of that. We saw the beginnings of that during the Black Lives Matters protest, when they consistently talking about defunding the police. And I think it was a lot of misunderstanding in terms of that concept, because I'm pretty sure they were talking about reorganizing the resources from the police, these local police. But when we're talking about making the homeless problem the homeless veteran problem, we're talking about defunding the big police, which is the United States government, which half of the United States government goes towards the military. So when we're talking, and keep that in mind, it's the same concept. We're not talking about defunding the military. We're talking about reorganizing the military. So because even in Los Angeles, all over the country, you can never come up with enough funds to solve these homeless problems on a local basis. Well, because what I mentioned earlier about the creation of a bureaucracy, you know, it's like President Eisenhower mentioned years ago when he talked about the military industrial complex. And then when we talk about Michelle Alexander, she talks about the prison industrial complex. It's the same thing with the homeless industrial complex. The more funds and money that you put off into trying to come up with a solution, you create this bureaucracy that has no incentive to solve the homeless problem. So the reason I think making the homeless problem, the homeless veteran problem as a first step is that it would allow a means to impact and access the United States military budget. And I'm talking about something that's separate from the VA or the Department of Veterans Affairs, et cetera, like that. We're talking about getting veterans involved with the community organizations that seek to solve the homeless problem and utilize the Veteran Connect to access cash money from this military budget. Now, also the religious institutions. The religious institution must step up and spearhead the effort to solve the homeless problem. Now, I did have a clip from Reverend Cecil Murray. When I won't play the clip, we won't go through that again, but let me just touch on what Reverend Cecil Murray, when I asked him that question, and it always resonated with me because I thought it was so important. Reverend Cecil Murray said that every religious institution should have a homeless component, no matter how large, how small, you know. And as I mentioned earlier in the video, is that it's a two-step process. That first process that we talked about with the veterans, et cetera, like that, because we got veterans all over the United States, you know, from all these particular wars and stuff. That's one of the long-range plans that you should be working on, putting that together, bringing these veteran organizations and these community organizations working together as a unit. But what can the interfaith community do right now in a place like Los Angeles? Can begin to do research and find all of these empty properties and begin to, what I mentioned earlier about Reverend Cecil Murray pointing out that every religious institution should have a homeless component, you know, and it's embedded within the orbit of each one of these scriptures. When you're talking about Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, it's really the center point of these particular religions. When you look at them from a historical point of view, the thing that all of them have in common is that just about all of them come out of process of slavery and freemen and poverty and et cetera like that, in terms of developing their particular theology. And keep in mind that when the Messiah Jesus announced his messiahship, he quoted from the book of Isaiah, and that was the center point about people coming out of prison, poor, poverty, et cetera like that. So the religious institution, the three major religions, more than three major religions, the interfaith community, like a group that we're talking about right here. Also, one of the things that I noticed from working with the homeless, and this is why I mentioned earlier about Kevin Michael Key, who really came, he was a lawyer who got caught up in drugs and substance abuse, and he eventually lost his law degree, came to Skid Row, and he got clean there. And he visualized Skid Row, you know, as a recovery zone, you know, where, and it's that too when you think about it, because you got all of these organizations down there that deals with recovery, the big missions, et cetera down there. But one of the main things that I noticed is for some of the homeless that would go into these particular organizations for a bed for a night, come out early in the morning, and but they do get the resources like meals, et cetera, like that. But from 6 o'clock in the morning to 6 o'clock in the evening, you know, there's nothing to do for these homeless, but to sit around. So this is where I think one of the things that we can add to the homeless model is what we call these adult daycare centers. And these adult daycare centers should be part of the housing models that they're trying to develop that deals with recreation, that deals with community activities. And we develop a model called the Nasana model that we work with, we think that would fit right in these adult daycare centers. And the Nasana takes its name from the first letters of 6 concepts working in a spirit of harmony to impact the violence in the individual home, school, and community. And those concepts are nutrition, exercise, spirituality, one-on-one needs fulfillment, and anti-violence situation coping groups, where we're using the dramatic concept of improvisation to improvise some of these violent and potential violent situations and put them under a microscope and come up with a solution before they escalate into violence. That is the Nasana model. So we think adult daycare centers will impact, because I think once you got these adult daycare centers, you also would be able to offer support services, et cetera, like that, to a lot of the homeless that come through, instead of just having them sitting out on the street or in one of the McDonald's or the library, et cetera, for what they used to utilize before the pandemic came on. The other one solution is what I call the Microscope Homeless Solution Think Tank. This is something that we started developing when we were working with the Compassionate group, and when we worked with St. Mark's and Pastor Bryant, et cetera, like that. And what we thought it was is to get 10 college students who would interview 24 stakeholders. Each one of the college students interviewed these 24 stakeholders about solutions, about conditions, et cetera, like that, in relationship to the homeless. And then take all of this information, organize this information and develop solutions from that. Because one of the major problems that we see now, utilizing the downtown area, is all of these different sectors who fail to work together, as a whole to solve this problem. The business community, activist community, service providers, person in the street, everybody have a different agenda instead of working together to solve the problem. So that is the end. I would just like to say, the homeless problem is a problem that affects all of us, regardless of race, creed, or color. The homeless is like the nails in the foundations of our community and our society. Some like hammers, some like saws, some just nails. But all are important to the overall foundations of the house. Just as the nails is a part of the whole that make up the entire house, it is the totality of tools like hammers and saws and those that use them that truly make up the foundation. It is you, the community members, who must reach out to the homeless population and integrate them back into the community. Thank you very much. So now I guess we can go into the Q&A and discussions.
Yeah, we're going to put, sorry. We go into questions and answers for about 20 minutes, and then we go into business. So anyone that has a question, you can raise your hand. Lucy? You're muted. Lucy, unmute, please.
Thank you so much for your presentation. And thank you also for emphasizing solutions as opposed to the quote homeless problem. I've been thinking along those same lines myself. I was wondering if you're familiar with a program called Urban Voices. It's a singing group, and I believe they operate in Skid Row.
Yes, yes,
and,
I'm familiar.
I was wondering if you're saying that people were sitting around, is it realistic to think that people that are sitting around could start singing, or is that just a small fraction of the solution?
Yeah, I think that they could do. We, along with our Nasana model, we developed what we call the community theater model. You know, which deals with all of that, just more than that thinking, because in our two models, the most important part of it is the anti-violence situation coping group. Being able, and the group is a formation of a circle, right? To be able to put violent and potential violent situations under a microscope, you know, and dramatize these situations with the community watching that in a circle, and then discuss these situations in terms of keeping these situations from escalating into violence. Now, the reason we developed the anti-violence situation coping group is because we thought that it was one of the main things that keep community members from coming together is the concept of violence, concept where you have a lot of violence in a particular area. I know earlier I heard Ruben mention about ceasefire, and we used to work with that particular gang intervention group also, where we feel that when you go to Skid Row and you look around Skid Row, and from talking to a lot of the residents down there, one of the major problems is that downtime, especially from a person that falls from mainstream society and you're trying to get yourself back together, and then you find yourself on Skid Row, you're waiting to get into a program. At the early stages of the program, you find yourself spending the night in one of the missions. You know, they provide a bed to keep you off the street. But you go in there at a particular time and you come out at 6 o'clock in the morning, and you're on your own for the rest of the day. See, and before the pandemic, you had places where the homeless would utilize as places like McDonald's or Burger King, the libraries, et cetera, like that. And it was a big challenge when the pandemic hit and closed all of those places down. It just created another level of problems for the homeless. But so to answer your question, I always think arts, culture arts, have a part to play, not the total part. It could be a link in terms of moving them from one stage to the next stage, because the overall goal is to integrate the homeless back into the community. This is what I was talking about earlier, and what Reverend Cecil Murray was talking about. You know, the ability for each one of the religious institutions to create a homeless component. You know, even if it's, you could be a small church or facility, then you might be able to do something like provide hotel rooms for a week, whatever like that, to help in that stage by stage process. But some of the larger religious institutions, they could be involved in building some of these facilities. You know, one of the things that Reverend Murray said when I was talking to him is where he felt that the interfaith community should be the one that's monitoring these resources that's coming in to solve the homeless problem. And I thought about that because I said, why is the interfaith community allowing the politicians to be in the forefront of dealing with this? You know, and I don't know how many of you trust, you know, the politicians, but I just think the interfaith community, it should be in there in terms, they should be at the center point of solving this homeless problem. And I think they could too.
I'd like to add on to what you said about resources. I was in a webinar where the city controller said that the city of Los Angeles had collected $1.16 billion to address the homeless problem. And he was saying that he was not satisfied with the way it was being sent. The proof to him was that people were dying, as you're saying. And he was actually asking for people to step up, just as you're saying, to monitor the resources. $1.16 billion, he said, had been collected by the city of Los Angeles to solve this problem, so-called problem. We're going to not say problem, we're going to say to create a solution. Thank you again. I'm going to mute because I go on.
Okay, I see some more hands up.
Next we have Anthony.
I think there were other people ahead of me, but anyway. Melvin, I love your thinking. I love your heart. I think the churches want to help. Many of them do like have programs like Family Promise, where they have families come into their church and actually stay there and rotate from church to church, and then they've helped them to find housing. And also churches want to build affordable and permanent supportive housing. Vita Vicha's church is a good example of that in Culver City. They just got 95 units of affordable housing approved. We're working with over 50 churches that want to have affordable housing built on their property. And that's what helps to end homelessness, right? Homes, yes. Not shelters, not tents, but homes. But we're running into roadblocks from our elected officials and even from well-intentioned groups that want to add all kinds of stipulations to these bills that make it almost impossible and unfeasible to build affordable housing. So it's a struggle. I just want to close by saying no affordable housing gets built without advocacy. And one of the most important tools of advocacy are people with lived experience, people who've been on the street, whose lives have been transformed by permanent supportive housing are some of our best advocates. And so I think there's a role for all of us to play. We feel we're not working for our homeless brothers and sisters, we're working with them because we all are, you know, as you point out, Jesus said, he came to proclaim good news to the poor, and the good news is that we're all a family and we need to work together to come up with solutions. So I just want to affirm you and what you're doing. It's great work. Thank you.
Okay, next, Carol Francis. Sorry.
Well, welcome, Melvin, and thank you. And I appreciate what you're saying. I really love the idea of the daycare and the improvisation and also the interviews, getting college students to interview people so that their voices are heard. What Anthony was saying, it's not working for them, but working with them. Hugo Chavez said the key to ending poverty is to empower the poor. And that just is really, to me, an amazing concept of exactly why some people don't want to work on that, because they're scared of the poor. They're scared of the poor ever being empowered, because then we might have a revolution. Could you talk about the work of Qumran and the radio programs and the other programs? I know there's a 3-on-3 sports program that people in the community in Skid Row have been working on.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the 3-on-3 basketball that was started by another important individual down in the Skid Row area, OG Man. He organized that. He's very, very involved with that. And also Bobby Buck, who have a show. But we started the Qumran Report at Skid Row Studios. A brother named Jeremy, he started Skid Row Studios, and we was one of the first shows there. And we decided to pick the name Qumran because if anybody know about the Dead Sea Scrolls, we know that was the community of Jesus, John the Baptist, etc., like that. And I thought that was a perfect example of a community. And we still don't, we did over, must have been about 250 episodes before Skid Row Studios closed. And then we went to Lamert Park and started working at Morris Media, did about 30 or 40 shows down there. But what we will be doing down, we also worked with the Roby Theater Company. We did a play called Revolutionary Genocide. It was one of my plays where it was about William Patterson and Paul Robeson, who took the United States to the UN and accused them of genocide in December 17, 1951. And we had Danny Glover. He read the role of William Patterson, and Ben Guillory, he read the role of Paul Robeson. And more people should know about William Patterson, because William Patterson is a very, very important historical figure, but because he was involved in the communist movement, he's basically been left out of history. I had a chance last June 10th to interview his daughter, who's still around, Mary Louise Patterson. She had just had a book about Langston Hughes, because that was like her godfather, et cetera, like that. It was so interesting to talk to her because she grew up around all of these historical figures like Paul Robeson, W.E.B. Du Bois, you name it, that came from the 20s. Her mother was Louise Patterson, also noteworthy. These people we should, because a lot of the things that we're dealing with right now, they were dealing with, especially William Patterson, because he was a lawyer for so many of the important cases leading up to the 50s and leading up to the civil rights movement. But what I'm finding out is how, I don't want to say uneducated our educators is about things like the whole concept of education. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I come from the Mississippi Delta. I went to a segregated high school called Coleman High School. And what a lot of people don't know, my hometown of Greenville, Mississippi, is the town that really caused Blacks to move from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party. It happened right there after the 1927 flood, when Hoover went back on his word to divide up the farmlands among the Black farmers down there. And so Moulton who succeeded Booker T. Washington, and he was the head of the Republican Party. One of the keys, he moved the Black community from the Republican Party of Lincoln to the Democratic Party of Franklin D. Roosevelt. And we've been dealing with that switch ever since. And then also in my hometown of Greenville, Mississippi, Coleman High School, it was that high school that was studied that led to desegregation and busing all over the country. Because what happened then, after the Civil Rights Bill was signed, they had a 2-year rider to study the equality of education in the United States of America. And this person named Robert Coleman, who was the top sociologist, he made that study, and he studied my high school, the 1967 high school, and came up with a lot of what I call misinformation that led into busting all over the United States of America. Not to get too far away from the subject, but we still we still do the Qumran Report. You know, I try to do it once. I used to do it every week. I try to do it on a monthly basis now until we can basically get back into the studio, et cetera, like that. I guess that's all I'll say on that subject for now.
Okay, Rose Leibowitz.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much. This has been fantastic. I've learned so much, and I love your thinking. And I certainly particularly resonate about the homeless industrial complex, sadly. What I just wanted to say was, I mean, I was actually writing down your ideas and relating them to the situation that I work with, where we're not in Skid Row, we're actually kind of in the valley, where it sounds easier, but in some ways it's not. People are not so kind of put together. But the adult daycare center, I love that. We kind of operate one of those. I could give you the information. But something that maybe in Skid Row is done by other people. But when people come in, the greatest need I find, after food and clothes, obviously, is that they have lost everything. They need help getting a birth certificate in order to get an ID. They need help getting Social Security. They need help getting GR. And that is a tremendous job and easily done by volunteers. And it's just something I would really encourage kind of faith communities to think about. But anyway, thank you so much. I've really enjoyed your presentation.
Thank you. And then it's so important to look at what's happening with the growth and the explosion of the tents all over the county of Los Angeles. That's what I mentioned earlier about at one time the tents was just concentrated in that Skid Row area. See, but now tents is everywhere in all of these communities.
Steve Brody.
You're on mute, Steve.
Please unmute.
We see that happening, and we never think it'll happen to us. Unmuting. Melvin, thank you so much for that. And I do hope being reintroduced to ICUJP this year, please continue to join us. You're on our mailing list. Join these Friday mornings whenever you're able to. You bring so much to our work, and we'd like to hear updates from time to time on your work, especially on the topic today. I did want to tell the group that you may recall we had an extraordinary presentation on June 10th by Kath Rogers from the ACLU Economic Justice and Dignity for All project. And the ACLU is doing very important work in this respect. On that occasion, she raised 3 initiatives in the area of housing And subsequently, last Friday at our board meeting, ICUJP voted unanimously to support the following 3 initiatives. And I'm bringing them back to your attention so you can watch for these initiatives as action items in light of the important information that Melvin has brought to our attention. The first is the adding housing status as a grounds for anti-discrimination laws. The California Government Code 11135 defines a whole range of grounds for anti-discrimination laws against the government. And this proposal would add housing status because of the criminalization of poverty that's going on, and housing is a major part of that. So continue to watch for efforts to add housing status to the anti-discrimination laws. The second is making a constitutional right to housing, to put it in our state constitution, which would have major impacts across the board. That is SCA 9. It would be the first state in the union to declare housing and the right to housing as a constitutional right. So watch for that and support every initiative to get that passed. And finally, closer to home in terms of the work that Melvin and others are doing, on the ballot in November, the United to House LA ballot initiative will be on the LA City election ballot. This would impose a 4 to 5% tax, one-time mansion tax on properties of $5 million or more. As Melvin pointed out, we have more homeless and we have more billionaires in LA. At the time of the sale of real estate valued at $5 million or more, there would be a one-time tax, and this could raise upwards of $875 million annually directly devoted to housing. So please support that initiative when it comes on the ballot this fall. Let me finish my remarks by saying that I agree with Melvin. A lot of money has been allocated through various ballot measures, initiatives at the county and city level, and even in the state budget. So money, there's an expression of what is necessary but not sufficient. Money is necessary but not sufficient. It's only going to be the willpower of interfaith groups, and I'm grateful to Melvin for emphasizing the need for religious organizations to step up on this question. ICUJP has been trying to do that for over 20 years. So it is pushing our elected officials to allocate those funds directly into permanent and sustainable housing, not tents, not shelters, that is so important. And as I finish, I do want to lift up Jill Shook and Anthony for the work they're doing in Pasadena. It is a model for enacting real solutions to housing issues. And we applaud that whenever we get a chance to. So that's just my effort to say ICUJP backs these 3 initiatives. We're going to be proactive in supporting them. I want everybody to know about them. I wanted Melvin to know that's the kind of actions that ICUJP is taking. Thank you, Melvin.
Rick Vinales.
Melvin, thank you very much for this presentation. It's been enlightening. I have to say that the last few months with presentations by folks like Anthony and other people about the housing issue in Los Angeles and all over the country has been enlightening to me, and it's been something that has given me a little bit better perspective on what's been going on. I wanted to ask you specifically about the idea of libraries being a source of facility that might be helpful in the housing problem, because it was something that came to me. I saw it a few years ago, that libraries are one of the few places in American society where you can actually spend a certain amount of time in and not be expected to purchase anything. It's someplace that is a haven, and not only the idea of libraries being a repository for information about human history, but it seems like there's a lot of opportunity there to work with a group like the American Library Association. A bunch of folks who have been radical for a long time about inclusion and about preserving the idea that everybody has a voice, and working with them about maybe making it easier for people to get a library card if they don't have a fixed address. Making sure that staff at libraries are trained to know how to work with unhoused people, be able to be a center for information and for resources. So I wanted to see what you thought about that, and what, if you guys have been able to do any work in that respect.
Oh yeah, I think the library will be an excellent resource, especially in terms of community members coming together. So many community members come through the libraries. And I thought that it would be a perfect spot for like anti-violence situation coping groups there. And I did work with one of my fellow veteran workers, Jeff Norman. He had an organization out of Long Beach, and he had made a connection with the libraries up there, the new libraries, to integrate programs like that. We worked together on that a few occasions. But yeah, library would definitely be a center point. And then the variety of communities where you have different libraries, because most of the spots where you have different libraries, despite the economic, in relationship to the economics of the area, you still have the mixed community where you would see homeless in that area. I think it would give the community members a good chance to understand the homeless, that the homeless is just like everybody else, regular community members, Yeah, so I think that's an excellent idea in relationship to that.
One thing that I also thought about too right now is that there's been a real uptick in community members actually doing readings, not only for adults, but for children with your organization. There's probably a really good opportunity to do that with the, LA County and LA City, library system.
Mm-hmm. And then I also think it's very important to take advantage of this new media that was created by the pandemic. What we call it in the theater world, we call it hybrid theater.
Yeah.
Being able to mix these two media. And I would like to see something like that in relationship to what ICU JP is doing with the Friday meetings, regardless of what happened in the future, to be able to keep this technology for those that might be in another part of the country that want to tap into what's happening with the organizations. Mm-hmm. Especially for those that would be on the East Coast, where a lot of people might find the early time a disadvantage or run into their work conflict. But when you start at 7:30 out here, what's it, 10:30 on the East Coast or 9, et cetera, like that? Yeah.
Steve Brody has another question.
Just on that last one, I think people's resilience and ability to adapt to terrible circumstances, someone might call that happy, but none of that, the resilience of people who are struggling, does not relieve the rest of us. It is not an excuse for us to give up our efforts. So whatever their willingness to smile and to make a good day out of their life, some of us may read that as them being happy. It's really the tenacity of the human spirit that's behind that, but none of that excuses us from doing the hard work. I raised my hand only, we have a few minutes, to go back to Melvin. And in all of your work on this, I always ask people, what do you think motivates comfortable people to oppose initiatives to help unhoused people? Why don't we get massive reaction and support? I mean, what's behind NIMBYism? Not in my backyard. Homeowners groups, community groups to oppose the slightest efforts at combating the struggle of the unhoused. Politicians speak of crime. They want to sweep through parks and arrest unhoused people and claim they're doing it in the best interest of the unhoused. But that mentality that is arrayed against everything we've talked about this morning, why do you think people arrive at that place in opposing these efforts? And the real meaning behind that question is, how do we talk to friends, family members, over the dinner table, at the water cooler, to change that kind of thinking?
Well, I think it all boils down to understanding or trying to avoid the history of the United States in relationship to the economics of what happened during slavery. And then I think what's happening now is we're still dealing with the results of that problem without taking care of that. You got concepts like this whole debate on the critical race theory in terms of keeping the citizens of the United States of America from really studying the history. And then I think the whole reparation movements in terms of taking care of that, because I think that's at the roots of what's happening. I just think of the people who have been pushing the reparations have been pushing it the wrong way. I see, when I look at reparations, I think this country would never be on the right footing until they deal with the realities of history and what happened during slavery, the economics of all of that free labor. And I think that we're at a point right now where we must make the citizens of the United States, all citizens of the United States, understand the importance of reparation in terms of revitalizing the economy of the United States of America. And also, when you look all over the United States, it's one ethnic group that have no community. They have no control of their community at all. See, and I think if we understand the needs to take care of this problem, take care of the problem of reparations. You know, the people that are speaking for reparations now, you know, they keep pushing it as this is something that the United States got to do. You owe us this, et cetera, like that, without understanding that reparation is needed to re-energize the economy that we're dealing with right now. See, and all of the problems that that we're dealing with in society is tied into what's happening, what happened during the early history of the United States, when so many people had to, was not in control of their particular labor, see? And that's where we at now. We need to take care of that. We take care of that. The descendants of the chattel slaves of America, we need to deal with that problem. We need to deal with their community and realize that these are separate communities. But so many of the leaders have been miseducated. Carter G. Woodson wrote that excellent book during the 1920s, you know, the miseducation of the Negro. He's talking about the Negro leaders and stuff. And then you had another author, he wrote a book called Plural But Equal. That was Harold Cruz. And that's what we're dealing with now, because we live in what you call a dual ethnic economic communities, where you have these different ethnic groups that control the livelihood of their particular community. And then everybody else exists and also compete in what I call the shopping mall community, with the exception of the descendants of the chattel slaves of America. See, so until we deal with that balance, so the country can come together, move forward, we got to leave something sensible for the next generation. See, people have to pay attention to our teenagers. You know, you look at all of the things that happen with our 18 and 19-year-old teenagers and some of the acts that they're committing. We better keep our eye on that. And then at the same time, we look at a place like Los Angeles and you ask, how many after-school programs do you have throughout the community? See, and to me, all of that is connected, it's important. We have to stop going in circles, because what I see now, what's happening with the homeless situation, it's the same as I saw it in 2006 when we started working in that Skid Row area, you know? So this is why I think the interfaith community has such an important job, regardless of whether you're Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Buddhism, it don't matter. When you trace that to the prophets that founded these particular spiritual systems, you see that what we're talking about now was at the center point of their religion. When you're talking about poverty, people coming out of prison, the homelessness and all of that, because they come out of a slave system. When you look at all these three major religions, you know, Jesus, you think if Prophet Muhammad, all of them, all have a connection to slavery and coming out of slavery generation after generation. Yeah. So, I think that's important. The interfaith community should step up. I mean, just let me say one thing. I've always thought that when it comes to the Skid Row area, it's one aspect of the interfaith community that must stand up. They're almost absent down there. And I'm talking about the Islamic community. You know, when you're talking about, now you have a lot of service providers down there, the Christian community, the Jewish communities, they're involved down there. But you asked the question, how many Islamic communities is involved down there? See, and then I don't want to forget a shout out to Jill and Anthony, because I have a book right over here on the shelf that I consult every now and then. But as I mentioned earlier, to me, at the top of this battle have to be the interfaith community. See, because the interfaith community, they have to, the fact that they come out of the same source, whether you're talking about Judaism, Christianity, or Islam, you're still tracing your spiritual and your physical root back to the prophet Abraham. See, so they're unified around that. They should be, like what Reverend Murray said, they should be like Columbo or the spies in terms of watching how these funds is utilized.
Melvin, we have announcements now. Then we have our closing circle. You remember when we used to hold hands, and
yes,
but now we do it virtually. And we end the closing circle with words of wisdom, spiritual words, a prayer sometimes to send us off for the week ahead. When we call on you, could you gather your thoughts now and give us those closing remarks to send us off?
Yes.
So in terms of announcements, I put in the chat just because Melvin mentioned it. And I wanted this group to know that the California Commission on Reparations has issued a historic, almost 500-page report. I put the link in the chat. This is the first state to issue, and this is the first report. It doesn't address how reparations will be implemented. It simply makes the powerful case of why reparations are due to those victims of the original sin, one of America's original sins in terms of slavery. So do please take a look at the interim report of the California Commission on Reparations, and the link is in the chat. My last announcement is a save the date for this group. September 11, Sunday this year, will be our 2022 George Regas Courageous Peacemaker Awards event, and a celebration of people who are doing important work for peace and justice in this community. A planning committee is currently working on that. If you have any ideas, and I reach out to everyone on this call and this screen beyond the board members, if you believe someone deserves to be recognized with a George Regas Courageous Peacemaker Award, please contact me. In a moment, I'll put my email in the chat. And if you would like to help in organizing this event, you know this organization has relied on volunteers. So I'll put my email if you want to nominate someone for the Regas Award and or help with this effort this year, please contact me. And Jasmine, you can call on others and then convene the circle.
Carol Francis.
Yes, thank you. I also put something in the chat, and that's what Melvin just told us about with Danny Glover and Ben Guillory that on revolutionary genocide. So You can go to the chat right now and click on that link, and it will just pop up in a separate thing that you can look at later. And so I also want to say that as the chairperson of the Outreach and Advocacy Committee, the board decided at the request of those of us who have been chairing these committees to consolidate the 3 committees into one, because people were choosing which Friday they would be able to spare. And as a result, we got fewer and fewer people and we weren't getting anywhere. So we're going to have one committee, and it will do the work that the 3 were trying to do, but we need your input on how to do this. So next Friday after this meeting, we're going to gather and have as many of you as possible that want to stay on. Just talk about where we go from here, informing these committees to do the work for bringing in more people and planning programs and bringing in more, advocating and outreaching to more organizations to get more of a community into working for justice and peace.
Anthony Menousis.
Hi, everybody. Just a quick announcement, which I put in the chat. Our organization is sponsoring a Housing Justice Forum via Zoom on Tuesday, June 28th, 7 p.m. And we are excited that 2 city leaders from Seattle will be speaking about how the city of Seattle rezoned religious property for affordable housing. And this effort was led by the African American churches, and who see this as a racial justice issue. So if Seattle can do it, we're hoping the state of California could do it. There's currently a bill being considered. It's going to go to the Natural Resources Committee on Monday. There's some opposition from environmental groups. We're hoping it gets through that committee and goes to be voted on. But this bill is a good bill and would rezone religious property throughout the state of California. So that's one of the things that we're advocating for, both statewide and locally, rezoning religious land for affordable housing.
Anthony, there's a health fair today at 38 Western Avenue. I put the notice in the chat. It's open to everyone and it's free. Haircuts and food and all that is free. It's a resource fair. I am very, very grateful for everyone's presence.
Jasmine, we can barely hear you. Could you
okay.
raise your voice?
Yes. Thank you for everyone being here. Thank you for Melvin, our presenter. Thank you very much. If anyone would like to lift anyone up, anybody we'd like to put in our circle, in our prayer circle, in our spiritual circle, in our mind's eye, we'd like to lift up. Please, you can say them or you can say it silently and just lift them up in thought and in prayer. I lift up all of us and all of in Skid Row, all the faith leaders in Skid Row, all the movers and shakers in Skid Row, all the ones that are for positive change and reform, and for the dehoused and the unhoused. And Carol Francis, is there a subcommittee meeting today? You're muted.
Not today, but the committee will be meeting to plan the committees next Friday.
Okay, next Friday. Okay. Steve, Rhodey, is there anything else that I need to do as a facilitator? No? Okay. Rose, Rose? Leave with?
No, we just
Hello?
we asked Melvin to give the closing.
Oh yes, Melvin. Melvin, will you please give a closing prayer for us? Thank you so much.
Yes, and I just want to thank you once again for inviting me out to speak. May the peace and blessings of the life-giving creative spirit be upon you and upon your family. Ask the Lord to unify and bless this group to keep doing great work. Bless and heal those who are sick, and please bring some peace to all of us. Thank you very much.